Ella Monroe was once a rising ballet star with dreams that could touch the sky, but now she serves coffee in a small downtown cafe, wearing a stained apron instead of a tutu. Her feet ache from standing all day instead of dancing across grand stages, and her heart carries the weight of what could have been. Yet everything changes when a mysterious cream-colored envelope arrives with no return address. Inside is an invitation that could reignite her forgotten dreams, but there's a catch to claim. This opportunity she must face her past, including her wealthy ex who shattered her confidence, and the only way forward involves a desperate plan. She approaches a powerful CEO named Marcus Webb with tears in her eyes and makes the most vulnerable request of her life: pretend to love me, just for one night. Make him believe I moved on. Make him see I am worth something. And what starts as a fake arrangement in a moment of raw desperation becomes a journey that will test whether broken dreams can be mended, whether a woman who lost herself can dance again, and whether love can bloom in the most unexpected places. This is a story of second chances, hidden courage, and the magic that happens when someone finally sees your worth. Ella Monroe wiped down the same sticky table for the third time that morning, her shoulders hunched with exhaustion that went deeper than physical tiredness. The fluorescent lights of Rosie's Café hummed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the chipped tiles and worn vinyl booths. She caught her reflection in the window and quickly looked away, not wanting to see the dark circles under her eyes or the way her blonde hair hung limp and lifeless around her face pulled back in a messy ponytail. This wasn't how it was supposed to be, she thought for perhaps the 1,000th time. This wasn't the life she had imagined when she was 18 and pirouetting across the stage of the downtown theater. Her body light as air, her spirit soaring with possibility. Back then, people said she had something special, that rare combination of technical skill and emotional depth that could take a dancer all the way to the top. But that was before the injury, before the surgery, before the slow, painful realization that her knee would never be the same, before reality came crashing down like a badly executed grand jeté. The bell above the door chimed, and Ella plastered on her customer service smile, turning to greet whoever had entered. It was just Marcus, the mailman, his weathered face breaking into a grin when he saw her. "Morning, Ella. Got something interesting for you today," he said, pulling a cream-colored envelope from his bag. "Looks fancy." She took it from him with trembling fingers that she hoped he didn't notice. There was no return address, just her name written in elegant script across the front. Her heart began to pound for reasons she couldn't quite explain. "Thanks, Marcus," she managed to say, her voice sounding strange even to her own ears. She tucked the envelope into her apron pocket, not trusting herself to open it right away. Not here under the fluorescent lights, with the smell of burnt coffee and the sounds of the morning rush beginning to build around her. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of orders and complaints and half-hearted smiles. She poured coffee and delivered plates of eggs and toast, and tried not to think about the envelope pressing against her hip, like a secret, like a promise, like a threat during her break. She finally allowed herself to slip into the back room, her hands shaking as she carefully opened the seal. Inside was a single card embossed with gold lettering, an invitation to the annual Downtown Arts Gala, a fundraiser for the Performing Arts Center where she had once danced, where she had once believed her future was being written. In every performance, the gala was in 2 weeks, and someone had reserved a ticket in her name. Someone wanted her there, but who and why? Her mind immediately went to him, to Nathan Cross, her ex-boyfriend, the man who had promised her the world and then left her with nothing. When her dancing career ended, when she was no longer the shining star he wanted on his arm, Nathan would be there. Of course he was. Always at these events, now that he had made his fortune in tech, now that he was exactly the kind of successful, powerful man he had always wanted to be. And she would be what exactly? The failed dancer, the waitress, the woman who couldn't let go of her past. Ella felt tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She wouldn't cry, not here, not over him, not anymore. But the thought of seeing Nathan again, of facing his pity, or worse, his indifference, made her stomach twist with anxiety. She remembered their last conversation 3 years ago when she was still in physical therapy, still believing she might dance again. He had looked at her with something like disappointment in his eyes and said, "I can't do this, Ella. I can't watch you struggle. I need someone who's going to soar, not someone who's just trying to survive." And just like that, He was gone, moving on to bigger and better things, while she was left picking up the pieces of her shattered dreams. She thought about the invitation all day, wondering if she should just throw it away, pretend she never received it. But something kept her from doing that. Something stubborn and proud that refused to let Nathan Cross be the reason she missed out on anything, even if attending meant facing her past. Even if it meant walking into a room full of people who remembered her as she was, and would see her as she had become by the time her shift ended. She had made a decision she would go to the gala she would hold, her head high, and she would show everyone, including Nathan, that she was still standing, still breathing, still here. But she couldn't go alone. That would be too pathetic, too much like admitting defeat. She needed someone by her side, someone who could make Nathan see that she had moved on, that she was doing just fine without him. She needed someone impressive, someone who could play the part. That night in her tiny studio apartment with its peeling wallpaper and temperamental heating, Ella sat on her sagging couch and tried to think of options. She had friends, of course, but no one who fit the bill. No one who could stand toe-to-toe with Nathan Cross and make him feel even a fraction of what she had felt when he walked away. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa, her only real friend from her dancing days, asking how she was doing. If she wanted to grab coffee sometime. Ella stared at the message, feeling the familiar ache of isolation. She had withdrawn so much over the past few years, buried herself in work and exhaustion, in the safer numbness of not trying, not hoping, not dreaming. Maybe that needed to change. Maybe this gala was exactly the push she needed to step back into her own life, to stop being a ghost haunting the edges of her own existence. The next morning brought a surprise that would change everything. She was taking out the trash in the alley behind the cafe when she heard voices raised in anger around the corner. She recognized them immediately. Kids from the downtown youth center where she had volunteered for a brief period last year, teaching basic ballet to children who had never had the opportunity to take formal dance classes. She had loved that work, loved seeing their faces light up when they mastered a new step, loved giving them something beautiful in lives that often held too much darkness. But she had stopped going, stopped showing up because it hurt too much to be around dance, to be reminded of everything she had lost. Now she heard Damien, one of the boys she had worked with, his voice cracking with emotion as he argued with someone about something she couldn't quite make out. She rounded the corner and froze. Damien was there along with two other boys from the center, and they were facing down a man in an expensive suit who looked distinctly out of place in this rundown alley. The man was tall, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples, and sharp features that might have been handsome if not for the cold irritation in his expression. He was holding a briefcase like a shield, and the boys were clearly hassling him, demanding money or attention or whatever it was that desperate kids demanded from people who looked like they had everything. "Hey!" she called out, her voice sharper than she intended. "What's going on here?" The boys turned guilty, expressions flashing across their faces, but Damien held his ground. "Miss Ella," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her heart clench. This guy just knocked over Tommy's stuff, didn't even apologize, just kept walking like we don't exist. The man in the suit looked at her with barely concealed annoyance. "I was in a hurry. I didn't see the items on the ground, and I've already explained. I don't carry cash. These kids need to learn that the world doesn't owe them anything." Ella felt anger flare hot and bright in her chest. "These kids, as you call them, are people. They deserve respect just like anyone else. And maybe if you weren't so busy looking down on everyone, you would have noticed you were about to step on someone's belongings." The man's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been surprise or curiosity flickering in his eyes. "And who are you to lecture me about respect?" he asked, his tone challenging. "I'm no one," she said tiredly. "I'm just someone who actually sees these kids, who knows their names and their stories, and knows they deserve better than to be treated like they're invisible." The man studied her for a long moment, and she felt suddenly self-conscious of her stained apron, her flyaway hair, her complete lack of sophistication compared to his polished appearance. Then, to her surprise, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet, extracting several bills and handing them to Tommy. "As an apology for my rudeness," he said, his tone formal. He looked at Ella again. "I hope that satisfies everyone." She nodded curtly and watched as he walked away, his expensive shoes clicking. Against the pavement, Damien let out a low whistle. Man. Miss Ella, you made Marcus Webb back down. Do you know who that is? Ella blinked. No, should I? He laughed. He only owns like half the buildings downtown. He's super rich and super mean. People are scared of him, but you just told him off like it was nothing. The name Marcus Webb tickled something in Ella's memory. She had heard it before, probably in the news or around the cafe. He was one of those tech moguls who had made his fortune young, and now spent his time investing in real estate and throwing his weight around. She felt a small surge of satisfaction that she had stood up to him, but it faded quickly, replaced by the familiar weight of her own problems. She spent a few more minutes, with the boys asking about their lives, their families the center, before heading back to finish her shift. But her mind kept returning to Marcus Webb, to the flash of something in his eyes, when she had challenged him, to the way he had actually apologized. Something about that interaction stuck with her, refused to let go. Maybe it was crazy, maybe it was desperate, but an idea was beginning to form in her mind. That evening she did something she hadn't done. In years, she researched Marcus Webb, finding articles about his business ventures, his investments, his very private personal life. There were photos of him at galas and charity events, always alone, always looking slightly bored and untouchable. He was 38, had built his first company at 25 and sold it for an astronomical sum. He was known for being ruthless in business, but there were also mentions of charitable donations to causes involving at-risk youth, which surprised her. There was an edge to him. She could see it in every photograph, but maybe there was something else too. Something that made him hand money to kids in an alley, when he could have just walked away. She found his office address downtown in one of the gleaming high-rises that seemed to touch the sky, and before she could talk herself out of it, she decided she would go there tomorrow. She would find Marcus Webb, and she would ask him to do something completely insane. She would ask him to pretend to be her boyfriend for one night at the gala. The idea was ridiculous, she knew that, but she was out of options, and something about their encounter in the alley made her think he might actually say yes. He didn't know her, didn't have any reason to care about her problems, but he had responded. When she challenged him, when she refused to back down, maybe he would respond to this too. Maybe he was bored enough with his perfect, untouchable life to say yes to something as crazy as helping a broke waitress make her ex jealous. She barely slept that night, her mind racing with possibilities, with the script of what she would say, how she would convince him that this was worth his time. She thought about Nathan, about the way he had looked at her with such disappointment, such pity. She thought about the gala, about walking in there alone versus walking in there with someone like Marcus Webb on her arm. Someone who could make Nathan Cross feel small for once, someone who could make him wonder what he had thrown away. The next morning, Ella called in sick to work. For the first time in months, she put on her best dress, which wasn't saying much. A simple black sheath that she had worn to a funeral 2 years ago, and did her best with makeup to hide the exhaustion in her face. She pulled her hair back in a neat bun the way she used to wear it for performances, and looked at herself in the mirror, trying to see what Marcus Webb would see. A desperate woman, yes, but also someone who was still fighting, still trying, who hadn't given up completely, even when it would have been so much easier to do so. She took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, and headed downtown, her heart pounding with each step that brought her closer to the gleaming tower where Marcus Webb had his office. The lobby was intimidating, all marble and glass and beautiful people moving with purpose. She felt completely out of place as she approached the reception desk, where a perfectly made-up woman looked at her with barely concealed disdain. "Can I help you?" the woman asked in a tone that suggested she doubted it very much. "I need to see Marcus Webb," Ella said, trying to sound confident. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I really need to speak with him. It's important." The receptionist smiled coldly. "Mr. Webb doesn't see people without appointments. If you would like to schedule something, I can have someone from his office call you in a few weeks." Ella felt panic rising in her chest. "No, you don't understand. I need to see him today. It's urgent, about a personal matter." The woman raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Mr. Webb doesn't have personal matters, and he certainly doesn't have time for walk-ins. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Ella opened her mouth to argue, but before she could speak, a familiar Voice came from behind her. It's fine, Rebecca ill, speak with her. She spun around to find Marcus Webb standing there in another expensive suit. His dark eyes fixed on her with an expression she couldn't quite read you. She said stupidly, "Me." He agreed. With the faintest hint of amusement, "The woman who lectures people in alleys, come on up to my office before my assistant has you escorted out." Rebecca looked like she had been slapped, but she said nothing as Marcus gestured for Ella to follow him. Toward the elevators, they rode up in silence 43 floors, and Ella used every second to try to calm her racing heart, to remember what she had planned to say, but her mind had gone blank, overwhelmed by the reality of what she was about to. They stepped out into a corridor lined with expensive art and entered a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. So said Marcus, settling behind his desk and looking at her with undisguised curiosity. "What personal matter brings you to my office unannounced on a Thursday morning?" Ella stood in front of his desk feeling like a child called to the principal's office. She opened her mouth and the carefully rehearsed words died on her lips instead. What came out was raw and unfiltered and desperate. "I need you to pretend to love me." Marcus Webb blinked, the first sign of genuine surprise she had seen on his face. "Excuse me." She felt tears spring to her eyes and she hated herself for it. But she couldn't stop now, couldn't back away from what she had started. "There is a gala in 2 weeks. The Downtown Arts Gala. My ex will be there. Nathan Cross, do you know him?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I know of him." "What about him?" Ella took a shaky breath. "He destroyed me. When we broke up, he made me feel like I was nothing, like my dreams meant nothing, and now he is going to be there, and I am going to be there, and I cannot walk in alone. I cannot let him see that I am still stuck, still struggling. I need someone to be there with me, someone impressive, someone who can make him wonder if maybe he made a mistake walking away from me." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, and she didn't care anymore. "I know this is insane. I know you have no reason to help me. But I saw something in you yesterday in that alley. You could have just ignored those kids, kept walking, but you didn't. You saw them. And I am asking you to see me just this once. Just for one night, please. I am begging you, help me do this. Help me feel like I matter again." There was a long silence, and Ella stood there trembling, waiting for him to laugh at her, or call security, or do any of the reasonable things a person in his position would do. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes, and said, "Tell me about him. About what happened." She hadn't expected him to want to know the story, but she found herself sinking into the chair across from his desk, and the words started pouring out. "I was a ballet dancer." She said, her voice steadier now that she was talking about something concrete, something real. "I was good. Really good. I had just been accepted into a prestigious company when I injured my knee. It required surgery, and the recovery was long and difficult. Nathan and I had been together for 2 years, and at first he was supportive, but as the months went on, and it became clear I might not dance again, he changed. He started pulling away, started looking at me like I was this sad, broken thing, and then one day he just said he couldn't do it anymore, that he needed someone who was going somewhere, not someone who was stuck, and he left just like that. 3 years together, and he walked away without looking back." Marcus listened without interrupting, and when she finished he was quiet for another long moment. Then he said, "What makes you think I would agree to this? What do I get out of spending an evening playing your fake boyfriend?" Ella wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "I don't know, honestly. I have nothing to offer you. No money, no connections, no skills that would be useful to someone like you. All I can offer is the truth, which is that I am desperate and out of options, and you are the only person I could think of who might possibly say yes." She met his gaze directly, refusing to look away, and maybe that's enough. Maybe knowing you helped someone who really needed it is worth something to you, or maybe you are just as cold and indifferent as everyone says you are, and this whole conversation has been a waste of both our time. Something flickered in Marcus' eyes, something that might have been anger or respect, or both. "You have no idea what people say about me," he said quietly. "They say a lot of things, and most of them are true. I am not a good person. Ella Monroe, I don't do things out of the kindness of my heart, and I certainly don't play games of pretend for strangers. She stood up feeling defeated. Of course he wouldn't help. Why would he? She had been foolish to even think this could work. Thank you for your time, she said quietly. I'll show myself out. But as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. However, there was a pause, and she turned back to look at him. I am intrigued by you, by whatever this is that made you bold enough to walk into my office and ask for something so absurd. And I find myself curious to see how this plays out. So yes, I'll do it. I'll be your fake boyfriend for the gala. But on one condition. Ella felt her heart leap. What condition you have to tell me the whole truth? No hiding, no pretending to be okay when you are not. If we are going to sell this, if we are going to make your ex believe that I am crazy about you, then I need to understand who you really are. Do we have a deal? She nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. We have a deal. Good, Marcus said. Standing and extending his hand, she took it and felt a jolt of something electric pass between them. Now get out of my office, I have actual work to do. Be here Saturday morning at 9, we need to practice our story. Figure out how we supposedly met, all the details that will make this believable. And Ella? He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Don't make me regret this. She left his office in a daze, barely remembering the elevator ride down or the walk back to her apartment. It wasn't until she was safely inside that she let herself react. Her hands, shaking, her heart racing with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. What had she just done? She had asked a stranger to help her deceive everyone at the gala, including her ex, and he had said yes. This powerful, intimidating man had agreed to her crazy plan, and now she had 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks to figure out how to sell the biggest lie of her life. 2 weeks to spend time with Marcus Webb and convince him she was worth the effort. Saturday morning came too quickly. Ella stood outside Marcus' office building at exactly 9, wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She had barely slept, thinking about what today would bring, rehearsing conversations in her head, trying to prepare for every possibility. Marcus met her in the lobby, looking impossibly put together even in casual clothes, dark jeans and a black sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Ready? He asked, and she nodded, following him not to his office but to the parking garage where a sleek black car waited. Where are we going? She asked as he held the door open for her. Somewhere we can talk without interruptions. He said, my place. If that makes you uncomfortable, I can take you to a restaurant instead. But I think we will work better in private. She trusted him for reasons she couldn't fully explain, so she got in the car and let him drive them out of downtown to a neighborhood she had never been to before. Houses here were massive, setback from the street behind gates, and perfect landscaping. His house was a modern masterpiece, all glass and clean lines and carefully curated minimalism. They settled in his living room with coffee he had made himself, which surprised her. Somehow she had expected him to have staff, to do things like that. So he said once they were seated, tell me everything I need to know. Start with Nathan. What was he like? What did he do that made you fall for him? Ella wrapped her hands around her mug, feeling the warmth seep into her cold fingers. Nathan was charming when I met him. He was working his way up in tech, always networking, always making connections. He loved that I was a dancer, loved bringing me to events and introducing me as his ballerina girlfriend. I think he liked the idea of me. More than the reality, he liked having someone artistic and beautiful on his arm, someone who made him look cultured and sophisticated. But when that fell apart, when I got injured and couldn't dance anymore, I wasn't useful to him anymore. I was just a burden. Marcus nodded, making mental notes on his phone. What about you? What do you want him to see when you walk in with me? She thought about it, trying to put into words the complicated tangle of emotions she felt. I want him to see that I moved on, that I am not the broken girl he left behind. I want him to wonder if he made a mistake. I want him to feel even just a little bit of what I felt when he walked away. Marcus looked at her steadily. Revenge. Then partially she admitted, but also I want to feel worth something again. For 3 years, I have been invisible. working a dead-end job, barely surviving. I want one night where I feel like I matter, where I am, not just the sad story people whisper about. I want to walk into that gala and feel beautiful and wanted and alive. Is that so terrible? He smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less guarded. Not terrible at all. Quite human, actually. Most people spend their whole lives wanting to feel those things. They just don't admit it as honestly as you do. They spent the next several hours working out their story. They decided they had met 3 months ago when Ella had been walking through downtown and literally ran into Marcus spilling his coffee all over his suit. He had been annoyed but intrigued by her apologies and her genuine distress, and had asked her to dinner to make up for frightening her. They had been seeing each other since, taking things slowly, because both of them were cautious about relationships. It was a simple story, believable enough that people wouldn't question it too closely. Marcus drilled her on details. Where did they have their first date? What did she order? What did they talk about? What were his quirks? What did he do? That drove her crazy. What made her laugh? At first it felt stilted, rehearsed, but as the afternoon wore on, something shifted. They stopped reading from a script and started actually talking. He told her about growing up poor in a rough neighborhood, about clawing his way up through sheer determination and ruthlessness, about the loneliness of success when you don't trust anyone because everyone wants something from you. She told him about falling in love with dance when she was 5, about the years of training and sacrifice, about the pure joy of moving to music, of feeling her body do impossible, beautiful things, about the devastation of losing, that the grief that never quite went away. They talked until the sun began to set, and Ella realized with surprise that she had enjoyed herself, that Marcus Webb was not at all what she had expected. Beneath the cold exterior was someone who understood struggle, who had fought for everything he had, who carried his own scars as they walked. To his car to drive her home, he said, "You're different than I thought you would be." She laughed softly. "What did you think I would be?" "I don't know," he admitted, sad, maybe defeated. "But you're not. Those things are you. You are angry, yes, and hurt. But you are also stubborn and brave, and you refuse to stay down." I respect that. Ella felt warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in longer than she could remember. "Thank you for today, for agreeing to this. I know it's crazy." Marcus shrugged. "Maybe, but crazy can be interesting, and I haven't been interested in much lately, so perhaps I should be thanking you." They met twice more before the gala, once for lunch at a restaurant Marcus frequented so people would see them together, start spreading rumors about Marcus Webb dating someone new, and once for shopping, because, as he pointed out, if she was supposedly dating him, she needed to look the part. Ella had protested vehemently against him buying her clothes, but he had been insistent. "This isn't charity," he had said firmly. "This is investment. If we want people to believe our story, every detail has to be perfect, and that includes your dress, your shoes, your jewelry. Think of it as costuming for the biggest performance of your life." When he put it that way, she couldn't argue. She was a performer, or had been once, and she understood about costumes, about creating an illusion. So she let him take her to boutiques she would never have dared enter on her own. Let him sit patiently while she tried on dresses that cost more than she made in 6 months, watching her with those dark eyes that seemed to see everything. Let him buy her a gown that made her feel like a princess, midnight blue silk that hugged her body and flowed like water, with a neckline that was elegant but not too revealing. The day of the gala arrived, and Ella was a wreck. She had taken the day off work, told her manager she had a family emergency, which wasn't entirely a lie. This felt like an emergency, like the most important night of her life. Marcus had sent a car for her at 4, and it took her to a salon he had apparently arranged where professional stylists did her hair and makeup, transforming her from tired waitress into someone she barely recognized. Her blonde hair was swept up in an intricate style with a few tendrils framing her face. Her makeup was dramatic but beautiful, emphasizing her eyes and her bone structure. When they were finished, she stared at herself in the mirror and wanted to cry. She looked like her old self, the Ella who had danced on stages, who had believed the world was full of possibility, who hadn't yet learned that dreams could break as easily as bones. The car delivered her to Marcus' house at 6. The gala started at 7, and they had agreed To arrive fashionably late at 7:30, make an entrance, he had said. People need to notice us walking in together. Need to start talking immediately. When she rang the bell, he opened the door himself, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. You look breathtaking, he said finally, and there was something in his voice that made her shiver. Thank you, she managed. You look pretty incredible yourself. He was wearing a tuxedo custom-tailored to fit his broad shoulders and tall frame. Perfectly, his hair was styled back, and he looked every inch the powerful billionaire he was. But there was something else too, a warmth in his eyes when he looked at her that hadn't been there before. Are you ready? He asked. Holding out his arm, she took it, feeling her heart pound, as ready as he'll ever be. Then let's go. Make your ex regret every decision he has ever made, he said with a slight smile, and they walked to his car together. The drive to the gala was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Ella kept running through their story in her mind, making sure she had all the details straight: where they had dinner on their first date, what movie they had seen last week, what pet name he supposedly called her darling. He had suggested, simple but effective. As they pulled up to the venue, her hands started shaking. Marcus reached over and took one of her hands in his steady and warm. Hey, he said quietly, look at me. She did, and found him watching her with unexpected gentleness. You are going to be fine. We are going to walk in there, and everyone is going to see how amazing you are. And if at any point you want to leave, if this becomes too much, you tell me, and we go immediately. No questions asked. Okay. She nodded, feeling tears threaten her carefully applied makeup. Okay, thank you, Marcus, for all of this. You didn't have to do any of this, and you have been so kind. He smiled, that rare smile that changed his whole face. Maybe you bring out a side of me I forgot existed now. Come on, let's give them a show to remember. They stepped out of the car, and immediately cameras flashed. Marcus Webb didn't usually attend these events with dates, and his sudden appearance with a beautiful unknown woman was clearly newsworthy. He kept his arm around her waist as they walked up the red carpet, stopping for photos, and she tried to remember to smile, to look happy and in love rather than terrified. Inside the venue was even more intimidating, a massive ballroom decorated in gold and white with chandeliers dripping crystal and waiters circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvre. Everywhere she looked, she saw people from her past dancers. She had trained with instructors who had taught her patrons, who had supported the arts. And yes, there in the corner talking to a group of men in expensive suits was Nathan Cross. He looked exactly the same, tall and handsome with his carefully styled brown hair and his practiced smile. He was laughing at something someone said, gesturing animatedly, and Ella felt her stomach twist with a complicated mix of emotions. Anger, yes, and hurt, but also something she hadn't expected: pity, because looking at him now she realized he hadn't grown at all, hadn't changed. He was still the same shallow man who only valued people for what they could do for him. Marcus must have felt her tense because he leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Is that him?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Want to go say hello, or would you rather make him come to us? She thought about it, then straightened her shoulders. Let's circulate. Let him see us. Let him wonder. And then if he wants to talk, he can come find us. Marcus smiled, impressed by her strategy. I knew there was steel under all that vulnerability. Come on, and he guided her into the crowd. They moved through the room, and Ella was amazed at how seamlessly Marcus played his role. His hand never left the small of her back, possessive but gentle. He introduced her to everyone they met. This is Ella, my girlfriend. She is a dancer. His voice full of pride. And when people asked follow-up questions, he deflected smoothly. She's taking some time off right now, focusing on other projects, aren't you, darling? And she would nod and smile and try not to. Think about how good it felt to have someone defend her, to have someone make her sound interesting and valuable, rather than washed up and pathetic. They had been there for about an hour when Nathan finally approached them. Ella saw him coming out of the corner of her eye, and she felt her pulse spike. But Marcus squeezed her waist, gently grounding her, reminding her she wasn't alone. Marcus Webb, Nathan said, extending his hand. I don't think we have officially met. though I have heard a lot about you, Nathan Cross. Marcus shook his hand with a grip that looked friendly, but Ella suspected was just a bit too firm. The pleasure is mine. I've heard you have done quite well for yourself. Nathan smiled that practiced smile, and then his eyes shifted to Ella, and she saw recognition dawn, followed quickly by shock. Ella, is that you? It's been, 3 years? How are you? She lifted her chin. I am very well, Nathan. Thank you, and you? He was still staring at her clearly, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the broken girl he had left behind. I am good, busy. You know how it is. His eyes flicked to Marcus, hand on her waist and back to her face. I see you have done well for yourself, too. I had no idea you were seeing someone. Marcus stepped in smoothly. We have been together for a few months now, keeping things quiet. You know how invasive the media can be. But Ella is remarkable. I feel lucky every day that she literally ran into me. That first day, Nathan looked like he had been slapped. Remarkable. Yes, she always was. His voice had an edge to it now. Something bitter creeping in. I assume you are still dancing. Ella felt the old shame try to rise up, but she pushed it down. No. Actually, I am taking a break, exploring other interests. Marcus has been incredibly supportive, helping me figure out what comes next for me. It wasn't entirely a lie. Marcus had been supportive in his own way, had listened to her talk about her fears and her lost dreams, without judgment, without making her feel small. Nathan nodded slowly. I am glad to hear that you look happy, Ella. She smiled, and this time it was genuine. I am happy, Nathan, probably happier than I have been in a long time. There was an awkward silence, and then Nathan excused himself, claiming he needed to speak with someone across the room as soon as he was gone. Ella let out a breath. She hadn't realized she was holding. How did I do? She asked Marcus, looking up at him. He was watching her with an expression she had never seen. Before something soft and admiring, you were perfect, he said simply. He looked like he had been hit by a truck. She laughed, feeling giddy with relief and adrenaline. Good, that is exactly what I wanted. They stayed another hour mingling and dancing. Marcus turned out to be an excellent dancer, moving with a confidence and grace that surprised her when she commented on it. He shrugged. I took lessons years ago, thought it would be useful for events like this. But dancing with you is different. You move like every step is part of a conversation. She blushed at the compliment. Dancing was always how I spoke. Best words were never my strongest skill. He pulled her closer as the music slowed. Well, you are doing just fine with words tonight. You held your own with Nathan, didn't let him make you feel small. I was proud of you. Those words meant more to her than he could possibly know, because Marcus Webb wasn't someone who gave praise lightly, wasn't someone who said things he didn't mean. She rested her head against his shoulder as they swayed to the music, and for a moment she let herself pretend this was real, that they were really a couple, that he really cared about her, that this wasn't all just an elaborate performance for the benefit of her ex. It felt so good to be held, to feel wanted to dance again, even if it wasn't ballet, even if it was just swaying in a ballroom with a man who was only pretending to love her. As the evening wound down, Marcus suggested they leave. They said their goodbyes to various people and made their way back to the car. Once inside, Ella finally allowed herself to relax, sinking into the leather seat with a sigh. We did it, she said, staring out at the city lights as they drove past. It is over, and you were amazing. Thank you for everything, Marcus. I know this was a huge imposition on your time, and I really appreciate it. He was quiet for a moment, then said, What if it doesn't have to be over? She looked at him, confused. What do you mean? What, if we keep doing this? He said, keeping his eyes on the road. Keep pretending to date. I mean, we already have the story established. People saw us together tonight. They believe it, and honestly, Ella, I enjoyed myself tonight more than I have at any of these events in years. Ella felt her heart start to race. Why would you want to keep pretending? Marcus finally looked at her, and there was vulnerability in his eyes that she had never seen before. Maybe because it doesn't feel like pretending anymore. Maybe because I like spending time with you, like the way you challenge me. and make me think about things differently. Maybe because for the first time in a very long time I feel like someone sees me as more than just my money or my power. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process what he was telling her. Marcus, we barely know each other. This whole thing was supposed to be one night just to make Nathan jealous. It wasn't supposed to be real. I know, he said. And I know that asking you to keep doing this is probably crazy, but here is the truth, Ella. I am tired of being alone, tired of not trusting anyone, tired of keeping everyone at arm's length. And you walked into my office and asked me to pretend to love you, and somewhere along the way over these past 2 weeks I stopped pretending. She felt tears spring to her eyes. You don't mean that you can't, you barely know me. I know enough, he said firmly. I know you are brave and stubborn and kind. I know you stand up for kids in alleys even when it might get you in trouble. I know you lost everything you loved and you are still fighting, still trying to find your way. I know that when you smile, really smile, not that fake customer service smile you do at the cafe, it lights up everything around you, and I know that I want to keep seeing that smile, want to be the reason for it if you will let me. Ella was crying now, unable to hold back the tears. This was too much, too overwhelming. Marcus, I am a mess. My life is a disaster. I have no money, no prospects, no future. What could you possibly want with someone like me? He pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face her fully. I want someone real, he said. Someone who doesn't want me for my money or my connections. Someone who sees me as a person, not as a bank account or a business opportunity. I want someone who challenges me and makes me feel something other than bore.